My name is Susan McCauley, and I write a blog called myalzheimersstory.com. And I also have a personal story to tell, and I think I can help perhaps and provide some information and maybe some ideas for you professionals to help you in what you're doing. So I lived in Dubai for 18 years, and in 2011 I gave up my life and I came back to Canada to care for my mom, who was diagnosed with dementia in 2006. And I think what happens with care partners is they get drafted into this role with absolutely no experience, no knowledge. You know, it would be like being taken to the airport and taken into a 747 and said, you know, go ahead and fly the plane. And there's, at the time in 2011, there were no, you know, I'm very internet savvy. I looked online. I could not find support at all. So in the past 6 years, I learned a lot about dementia, and I learned a lot about caregiving. So I think that there are two, stigma is really important in the sense that it sets people up to fail from the very beginning as caregivers. And what is required, the reason why people burn out, I know because I did burn out, is because they're unable, they don't have enough knowledge about the disease itself, and they're unable to deal with the behavior of the disease. So associated with the stigma are something that are labeled the behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia, which in my opinion, after 6 years of experience and observation and my own research, I don't believe that those behaviors, responsive behaviors, as Dr. Frank said, they are normal behaviors. However, they're repeated and they're escalated, and they're very difficult for the care partners to deal with because they're not educated as to what to do. So as a result, the situations escalate and everybody becomes very stressed. If the care partners were taught at the beginning of their caregiving journey how to manage dealing with people who are living with dementia, and they themselves are also living with dementia, that would reduce the stress levels for the care partners, both care partners, the people who have living with dementia, who have dementia, and those who are caring with them, and it would enable them to care for people for a longer period. Thus they would be able to stay in their own homes for a longer time, and it would save a whole bunch of money. Another point that I wanted to talk about is the use of antipsychotic medications to sedate people who have dementia, who live with dementia. When I first went to care for my mom, was unable to sleep at night because she was awake. So this means you get exhausted. I went to the family doctor. He gave an antipsychotic medication. I then took her to her geriatrician. She got another antipsychotic medication, which at that point in time I didn't understand because I trusted the medical people. And so after a year, she was placed in a long-term care facility, and I used the word care, but it wasn't care at all. Very shortly after she went in, because of this belief that these behaviors are the result of dementia rather than the result of the environment and the way that care is delivered, then the people who are in the facilities get more sedated, which happened to my mom. And so she was on high levels of medication for 2 years. And I feel that this is really wrong. People need to be trained in how to actually care for people instead of warehousing and sedating them. So when you talked about jail, to me, that's the term I would use for the place that my mom was. And I believe that elder neglect and abuse are widespread in Canada. and in particular in Quebec, where the rate of prescriptions of antipsychotic medications are 1,300 prescriptions per 1,000 elderly population, which is double that of Ontario and New Brunswick and four times that of the lowest provinces. So in my opinion, that's an indicator that there's widespread elder abuse throughout nursing homes in Quebec, of which my mom was living in one. I believe that there are people such as myself, so I have learned, now give webinars, and we'll be doing some seminars to help caregivers at the beginning of their journey to understand how to interact with people who are living with dementia so that everybody doesn't get as stressed as they do and the situations don't escalate and everything gets, matters get made worse. So I think there's an opportunity for the Alzheimer's Society perhaps to draw on the expertise of people who have been caregivers before, who understand and know how to deal with the situation, to support other care partners to alleviate a lot of the difficulties and challenges that are in place for in-home caregivers. Thank you.
Before I open it up to the audience or to our panel, I think you've given, Susan, you've given a powerful summary, and if we've got some specific things, I'll ask the panel to get back to them. But one of the things that we noted in our study on prescription pharmaceuticals in Canada, we did a 4-part study, and the issue of over-medication is widespread throughout the entire medical spectrum. And it becomes pronounced in senior care and even more pronounced in the case of patients with dementia or those who have other issues that cause behavioral or motion issues. I'll put them together collectively. It is a major, dramatic problem. And I think the idea of the human rights of seniors, we know they are hugely violated in many areas, but this one in absolutely. It's a very serious situation. Members of the panel, any?
Just yes. Comment on that. I fought for 4 years to get my mother. She was both physically and chemically restrained, and I was not the one in legal control of her care. And I fought for 4 years against the long-term care facility that she was in. I went to court to try to get control of her care. And nobody believed me because I wasn't, I'm not an expert. Well, I'm an expert now. And I know what I'm talking about, and I know what I've seen. And I've got audio, video, I've got everything I need to demonstrate what happens. And it's really ugly. And when my mom went into care, I thought I was handing her to people. I didn't want her to go in. Again, I fought it. I thought I was giving her to people who knew what they were doing. But they didn't know. I knew more about how to deal with her, how to manage her, because I learned as I went. I knew more after a year than the people in the place knew, than the nurses that were teaching at the local college. So it's widespread elder abuse, and it's wrong. And you can't see it because nobody will report it. People like me who stand up, they tried to silence me. They threatened me with not being able to see my mom. They restricted the hours that I was going to see her. They did everything they possibly could to dissuade me. They made me I wasn't allowed to mention my mother's name in public. I couldn't talk about her. I couldn't have photos of her. I had to take 250 posts off my blog. Now, my mother died in this year, and I'm putting everything back up again, and I'm restarting my advocacy so that other people don't have to go through what I have gone through and what she suffered, which is a travesty. She didn't deserve it, as Catherine said. Our mothers, our elders don't deserve what's happening.
Thank you. Linda?
I think, again, thank you, Susan. I think it speaks to several points. A couple of things jumped out at me. Again, I think when I was talking about long-term care, I think if we see it as home, as an extension of home, as a, we're talking about things, again, I think as Debbie was saying, we're dealing with things at a high level here and that might not address specific issues. However, I think in our minds, if we start looking at long-term care homes as homes rather than hospitals, it might help us look at how to make priorities and where we make choices and the kinds of things that we want to have. One of the things that happens in there, it's an extremely regulated environment, and the staff has a lot, so I'm not excusing anything, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm sure that if we had a show of hands here, how many people here are caregivers or have been or whatever, probably the majority of people in this room would be raising their hands. So the regulation of it makes it sometimes that the people who do want to do good and do get it can't. And sometimes, you have to give 2 baths a week. Well, bathing is like one of the issues that's going to bring up behaviors. So the good news of it, I think, so one of the things is in moving forward, I think we need to bring in those examples to remind us that we need to start looking at them as homes. One, deprescribing is definitely an issue. It's one of the things that is being looked at very, in lots and lots of details. Homes are being held accountable for, how they're doing on that and where things are going. Sometimes they get pressure from families that they want them to keep them on drugs because, they're having these behaviors. So they have to deal with that issue.
Can we,
There's an important,
Linda, I'm going to ask, I know there's at least one more questioner. Can I see a show of hands of others who may want to ask a question? We only have 12 minutes.